Please, Eliza, we've exhausted our options. Your mother and I didn't save enough for retirement. We need help. I clutched my coffee mug tighter, memories flooding back of the day they told me my college fund, money my grandparents had specifically left for me, had been reallocated to my sister because she was showing more academic promise. Now, 15 years later, they needed my success. The success I'd clawed my way toward without their support. We're not asking for much, my father continued, his voice softer now, employing the same persuasive tone he'd used when explaining why Vanessa deserved my education fund more than I did. Just enough to cover the mortgage until we can figure something out. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I stared out my apartment window at the Manhattan skyline, the view I'd worked double shifts and took on crushing student loans to eventually afford. My reflection stared back, no longer the devastated 18-year-old who'd watched her future crumble, but a successful 33-year-old financial advisor who'd built everything from nothing. Eliza, are you still there? I am here, Dad. My voice sounded distant, even to my own ears. Your mother wouldn't want me calling you. Well, you know how proud she is. But we're 3 months behind on payments, and the bank is threatening foreclosure. Pride. That was rich coming from the woman who'd told me I wasn't college material anyway, so the money would be wasted on me. The same woman who'd displayed Vanessa's academic awards prominently in the living room while my art scholarships gathered dust in a drawer. What about Vanessa? I asked, already knowing the answer. Can't your golden child help? A heavy sigh. She's going through a difficult time. The divorce, the kids, her job. She's stretched thin. Of course. Vanessa was always going through something, always needed rescuing, always deserved the safety net more than I did. I need to think about it, I said finally. I'll call you back. I ended the call before he could protest and sank onto my couch, the familiar knot of resentment tightening in my chest. 15 years had passed since that devastating dinner when my parents announced they were giving my college fund, $120,000 left specifically to me by my grandparents, to Vanessa for her medical school aspirations. She's consistently on the eye. Dean's List, Eliza, Mom had explained, cutting her chicken into precise, tiny pieces. You're barely maintaining a B average. Your grandparents would understand that the money should go where it will do the most good. I'd sat there, 17, years old, watching my future evaporate. But Grandpa specifically left it for me. He knew I wanted to study finance. Finance. My mother had practically spat the word. What kind of fulfilling career is that for a woman? Your sister will be saving lives. No one mentioned that my B average came while working 30 hours a week at a local cafe to save extra money for books and living expenses, or that I'd been accepted to 3 good schools already. No one acknowledged that the money was legally mine, designated in my grandparents' will, but placed in my parents' care until I turned 18, which was still 8 months away. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Rachel. How'd it go with your dad? As terrible as expected? I texted back, worse. They want money for their mortgage. Apparently, retirement planning isn't necessary when you have a successful daughter you treated like garbage. Rachel had been there through everything. The night I'd cried until I was physically ill after that dinner. The years of working while studying. The crushing student loan payments. She'd let me crash on her couch during breaks when I couldn't afford to fly home and wasn't particularly welcome anyway. Want me to come over? I'll bring wine and we can plot appropriate revenge scenarios. I smiled despite myself. Rain check. Need to process this alone first. My doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw my neighbor, Mrs. Patel, holding a small package. This was delivered to me by mistake, she said when I opened the door. Then, noting my expression, bad news, Beta? Mrs. Patel had become something of a surrogate mother figure since I'd moved into the building 5 years ago. At 72, she had the wisdom of experience and none of my mother's judgmental tendencies. "Just family stuff," I said, taking the package. "My parents need money." "Ah," she nodded knowingly. "The same parents who gave your education money to your sister?" I'd shared that story once during a particularly difficult day when my student loan payment had increased just as my rent went up. Mrs. Patel never forgot details. "The very same. Come have chai. Family matters require perspective, and perspective requires distance and good tea." 20 minutes later, seated at her meticulously arranged dining table, I found myself explaining the entire situation: my father's call, their financial predicament, and the tangled mess of emotions it stirred up. They had 15 years to prepare for retirement, I said, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. 15 years while I worked myself half to death paying off loans for an education that should have been covered. Mrs. Patel nodded, her silver hair catching the afternoon light. "And your sister? The doctor who was so deserving?" "Dermatologist," I corrected. "Specializing in cosmetic procedures. Not exactly saving lives like Mom envisioned. She married rich, divorced richer, and from what I gather through the family grapevine, spends most of her substantial alimony on luxury vacations and beauty treatments." "While you built your life brick by difficult brick," Mrs. Patel observed. "I'm not looking for validation that I made better choices," I sighed. They stole from me. They took what was legally mine, dismissed my dreams, and now they're asking for help because their golden child is too self-absorbed to provide." Mrs. Patel set down her cup with a decisive clink. "You want permission to say no?" "Maybe?" I hesitated. "Or maybe I want a legitimate reason to help that doesn't make me feel like a doormat." She leaned forward, her eyes kind but resolute. "Let me tell you something about family debts, Eliza. They're rarely just about money. Your parents created a deficit of trust, respect, and love long before they asked for a dollar. Whatever you decide must address all these debts, not just the financial one." As I returned to my apartment, Mrs. Patel's words echoed in my mind. A deficit of trust, respect, and love. She was right. This wasn't just about money. It was about years of favoritism, dismissal, and the fundamental betrayal of parents who should have supported both their children equally. My laptop was still open on the coffee table. Almost unconsciously, I found myself searching through old files, looking for a specific document I'd kept all these years. It took several minutes of digging through backup drives, but eventually, I found it. A scanned copy of my grandparents' will, the section specifically designating funds for my education highlighted in yellow. Adjacent to it was another file, emails, between my grandfather and me in the months before his death, discussing my interest in finance and his encouragement. "You have a mind for money, Lizzie," he'd written. "Sharp and practical. Don't let anyone tell you that's not a worthy pursuit." As I stared at the documents, a plan began to form. My grandfather had been a meticulous record keeper and a firm believer in accountability. He'd also left something else behind, something my parents didn't know about, something I'd discovered only 3 years ago when clearing out a storage unit containing his personal effects. I reached for my phone and dialed Rachel's number. "Changed your mind about that wine?" she answered. "No," I replied, my voice steadier than it had been all day. "I need a favor. Remember that box of my grandfather's journals I found? The ones documenting all his financial decisions? The ones you couldn't bear to read because they made you miss him too much? Sure. I think it's time I went through them. All of them. Can you come over tomorrow and help?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "This is about more than just your parents asking for money, isn't it?" I looked again at the will on my screen, at my grandfather's clear intention to secure my future. an intention my parents had deliberately ignored. Yes, I said finally. I think Grandpa left more than just money behind. I think he left evidence. After hanging up, I walked to my bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of my dresser, removing a small wooden box. Inside lay a single key with a small tag attached, Safety Deposit Box, 247, First National Maple Creek Branch. My grandfather's final safeguard, entrusted to me on my 30th birthday by his lawyer, with instructions to use it when the time is right. I had a feeling that time had finally come. The next morning, my phone displayed 3 missed calls from my father and 1 from a number I recognized as my mother's. I silenced it and set it face down on my kitchen counter. Coffee first, family, crisis second. My apartment, a hard-won 1-bedroom in a doorman building near Central Park, was my sanctuary. Every piece of furniture, every artwork on the walls represented a victory, something I'd purchased after a promotion or bonus. Nothing had been handed to me, unlike Vanessa, who'd received not only my college fund, but also a down payment for her first condo, wedding expenses covered in full, and regular gifts whenever she faced financial trouble. A knock at my door announced Rachel's arrival. She entered carrying a cardboard box labeled Grandpa Joseph's Papers and a tray with 2 large coffees. "I figured you might need reinforcements," she said, setting everything down. "Extra shot of espresso, splash of vanilla, just like you used to make when we were drowning in finals." Rachel had been my roommate in the cramped off-campus apartment I could barely afford during college. She'd witnessed firsthand the toll of my financial struggles, the 5 a.m. shifts before classes, the ramen dinners, the textbooks purchased used and falling apart. "You're a lifesaver," I said, gratefully accepting the coffee. "Did you bring all the journals?" "Everything I could find in your storage unit. There are financial records, personal journals, and some envelopes of correspondence." She eyed me carefully. "You going to tell me what you're looking for?" I sipped my coffee, organizing my thoughts. When Grandpa died, he left specific instructions in his will about my education fund. $120,000 for college, to be held in trust by my parents until I turned 18. But 8 months before my birthday, they gave it to Vanessa instead. "Yeah, I know that part," Rachel said. "That's why you had to work through school while Vanessa got her dermatology degree debt-free. What I never told you is that I always suspected there was more to it. Dad was Grandpa's executor, but he rushed through the will reading. We never got copies. When I asked questions, they shut me down, said I was being ungrateful and difficult." Rachel's eyes widened. "You think they altered the will?" "I don't know. But Grandpa was meticulous about his finances. He documented everything. And now, they need money, my money, because they've mismanaged their retirement. It feels like history repeating itself." We spent the next 3 hours sorting through years of my grandfather's immaculate record-keeping. His handwriting, precise and slanted, filled dozens of leather-bound journals. Bank statements, investment records, and correspondence with financial institutions were organized chronologically in labeled folders. "Eliza, look at this," Rachel said, holding up a journal from 2006, 2 years before my grandfather's death. "He's discussing trust structures for both you and Vanessa." I took the journal, scanning the page. My grandfather had written about setting up 2 separate trusts, mine for education and a smaller one for Vanessa that would mature when she turned 25. "He created 2 different funds," I said, surprised. "I only knew about mine." Rachel frowned. "If Vanessa had her own trust coming, why did your parents need to take yours for her education?" "Good question," I murmured, flipping forward several pages. "Here, he mentions meeting with his lawyer, Franklin Williams, to finalize the trusts. Says he's sending copies of the paperwork to Dad for safekeeping." Franklin Williams. Rachel pulled out her phone. "He still practices in your hometown. His office is on Main Street." a chill ran through me. That's not all Grandpa left. I retrieved the small wooden box with the safety deposit key. On my 30th birthday, I received this from another lawyer, Patricia Garza. She said Grandpa arranged for me to get it when the time was right. I never used it. 3 years ago? Rachel raised an eyebrow. Why didn't you open it then? I shrugged, turning, the key over in my hand. I had just made senior advisor at the firm. Life was good. I didn't want to dredge up old resentments. And now? Now my parents want my hard-earned money after stealing what was rightfully mine. I'd say the time is definitely right. My phone buzzed again. A text from my sister. Dad says you're ignoring his calls. They really need help, Eliza. Don't be petty about ancient history. Rachel read the message over my shoulder and snorted. Ancient history? You're still paying off student loans. $657 a month, I confirmed. For another 4 years. So what's the plan? Rachel asked, gesturing to the scattered papers and the safety deposit key. First, I need to find out exactly what was in Grandpa's will. The real will. Not whatever version my parents presented. Then I'll head home next weekend and visit this safety deposit box. Want company for the trip down memory lane? I smiled gratefully. I was hoping you'd offer. Before Rachel left, we organized our findings into 3 piles. Definite evidence of separate trusts for Vanessa and me, correspondence with lawyers, and my grandfather's personal notes about his financial intentions for both granddaughters. Alone again, I finally called my father back. Eliza, thank goodness, he answered immediately. We were getting worried. I've been busy, I said evenly. Working, at my job that I had to fight to get without the education fund. Grandpa left me. A heavy sigh. Are we going to go through this again? That was 15 years ago. And yet here we are, with you asking for my money again. It's different this time, he insisted. We're not asking for a handout. We can offer collateral, our house. The house that's 3 months behind on payments and facing foreclosure? We raised you in this house, he said, his voice taking on that familiar, guilt-inducing tone. Your childhood home? Do you really want to see it lost? I closed my eyes, counting to 5 before responding. Dad, I need some time to think about this. It's a significant amount of money. How much time? The bank won't wait forever. I'll come home next weekend, I decided. We should discuss this in person. A pause. Your mother will be pleased to see you. I doubted that very much. My last visit, 2 Christmases ago, had ended with my mother criticizing everything from my career choice to my unmarried status, comparing each unfavorably to Vanessa's supposed achievements. The fact that Vanessa was now divorced and struggling professionally despite her advantages never seemed to diminish my mother's golden view of her. I'll drive down Saturday morning, I said, ignoring his comment. And Dad? I'll need to stop by Maple Creek while I'm there. I have some banking to do. After hanging up, I sent a quick email to Patricia Garza, the lawyer who had delivered my grandfather's key. I explained my upcoming visit and asked if she'd be available to meet. Her response came within the hour. Eliza, I've been waiting for this email for 3 years. Your grandfather was very specific about the timing being your choice. I'll clear my schedule for Saturday afternoon. There's much to discuss. That night, I couldn't sleep. I found myself at my computer at 3 a.m. Our researching inheritance laws, trust violations, and statutes of limitations. The legal terminology swam before my tired eyes, but one thing became clear. If my parents had manipulated or misrepresented my grandfather's will, there could be serious consequences, even 15 years later. By morning, I had made 2 additional appointments in my hometown, one with Franklin Williams, my grandfather's original lawyer, and another with a current estate attorney to review any documents I might uncover. My workday was a blur of client meetings and investment analyses. As a senior financial advisor specializing in retirement planning, the irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my days ensuring others wouldn't face the crisis my parents were experiencing, yet they had deliberately undermined my own financial foundation. When I returned home that evening, there was a small package outside my door. Inside, I found a handmade scarf and a note from Mrs. Patel. For your journey home. Remember, you go not as the child they dismissed, but as the woman who succeeded, despite them. Stand tall, Beta. I wrapped the soft wool around my fingers, grateful for the reminder. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about truth, accountability, and finally closing a wound that had never properly healed. The drive to Maple Creek took just under 4 hours, but it felt longer, each mile bringing me closer to a past I'd worked hard to distance myself from. Rachel chattered beside me, alternating between gossip about mutual friends and strategizing about our mission. So what's our first stop? She asked as we passed the faded, "Welcome to Maple Creek" sign, population 12,500 proudly proclaimed beneath. Franklin Williams's office, I said, checking the time. We have an appointment at 11. Main Street? Hadn't changed much. The same brick storefronts, the courthouse with its weathered clock tower, the diner where I'd worked weekends during high school. What had changed was how I felt driving through it. No longer the trapped, desperate teenager counting down days until escape, but a successful woman returning with purpose. Franklin Williams's law office occupied the second floor above the town. Pharmacy. The building's elevator was perpetually out of order, so we climbed the narrow staircase to a door with frosted glass bearing his name in gold lettering. Inside, a gray-haired receptionist looked up from her computer. You must be Elizabeth. Richardson, she said, rising to shake my hand. Mr. Williams is expecting you. The lawyer was older than I remembered, well into his 70s now, with thinning white hair and liver spots dotting his hands. But his eyes were sharp as he assessed me over reading glasses. Elizabeth? He greeted, gesturing to chairs opposite his desk. It's been quite some time. You've grown into a fine young woman. Thank you for seeing me on short notice, Mr. Williams. He nodded, folding his hands on the desk. Your email mentioned Joseph's will. I must say, I was surprised. That matter was settled years ago. Was it? I leaned forward. Mr. Williams, I'd like to see a copy of my grandfather's will, the complete document. He frowned slightly. Your father was the executor. He should have. My father never showed me the complete will, I interrupted. Only told me what he claimed was in it. I'd like to see it for myself. The lawyer studied me for a long moment, then nodded. I keep copies of all executed wills in secure storage. Give me a moment. While he stepped out, Rachel squeezed my hand. You okay? Fine, I said, though my heart was racing. Just ready for answers. Williams returned carrying a thick folder. Here we are. Joseph Richardson's last will and testament, executed February 12, 2008. He opened it, turning pages until he reached a tabbed section. This is the portion regarding the educational trusts. I took the document with trembling hands, Rachel reading over my shoulder. To my granddaughter, Elizabeth Ann Richardson, I bequeath the sum of $120,000, $120,000, to be held in trust for her educational expenses. This fund shall be managed by my son, Thomas Richardson, until Elizabeth reaches the age of 18, at which time full control shall transfer to her directly. My breath caught as I continued reading the next paragraph. To my granddaughter, Vanessa Marie Richardson, I bequeath the sum of $75,000, to be held in separate trust until she reaches the age of 25, at which time the full amount plus accumulated interest shall be released to her directly for use at her discretion. I looked up at the lawyer. Vanessa had her own trust, a completely separate fund? Williams nodded. Your grandfather was quite clear about his intentions. Elizabeth was to have funds for immediate educational use, while Vanessa, being 5 years younger, would receive her inheritance later. And these were separate accounts? The money couldn't be combined or reallocated? Absolutely not. Williams looked troubled. The trusts were legally distinct entities with specific stipulations. Any deviation would require court approval. Rachel's grip on my shoulder tightened. Mr. Williams, Eliza's parents gave her college fund to Vanessa when Eliza was 17. They claimed her grandfather would have wanted the money to go to the more academically promising granddaughter. The lawyer's bushy eyebrows shot up. That would directly contradict Joseph's expressed wishes. Did you sign any documents authorizing this transfer, Elizabeth? No, I said, the knot in my stomach tightening. I was told it was my parents' decision as trustees, that I had no say until I turned 18. Williams's expression darkened. That's troubling. Very troubling. Indeed. He flipped through the will, stopping at a different section. There's something else you should know. There was a codicil added 3 months before your grandfather's death. He handed me another document, this one just 2 pages long. In the event that the educational trust established for my granddaughter Elizabeth is not used for its intended purpose, I direct that an equal amount shall be set aside from my remaining estate and placed in a secondary trust to be revealed to Elizabeth upon her 30th birthday. My hands began to shake. He knew. Somehow he knew they might try to divert the money. Williams removed his glasses, polishing them slowly. Joseph was a shrewd man who understood family dynamics better than most gave him credit for. He came to me with concerns about your father's financial management. This codicil was his insurance policy for you. Did my father know about this provision? The codicil was properly filed with the court, but Williams hesitated. Your father seemed in a hurry to settle the estate. He may not have reviewed all documents as thoroughly as recommended. Or he chose to ignore it, Rachel muttered. I looked back at the codicil. This mentions a secondary trust to be revealed on my 30th birthday. I received a key to a safety deposit box from another lawyer, Patricia Garza, 3 years ago. Recognition flickered in Williams's eyes. Patricia was my associate at the time. Joseph arranged certain matters through her directly, for reasons he chose not to disclose to me fully. Mr. Williams, I said carefully, based on what I've shown you, did my parents violate the terms of my grandfather's will by redirecting my educational trust to Vanessa? He sighed heavily. I'm not comfortable making definitive legal statements without reviewing the full history, but based solely on these documents. Yes, it appears there was a significant breach of fiduciary duty. The room fell silent. Despite suspecting the truth for years, having it confirmed by my grandfather's own lawyer sent a wave of emotions through me. Vindication, anger, grief for what might have been. What are my options now? I asked finally. That would depend on your goals, Williams replied. If you're seeking legal remedy for the misappropriated funds, you could pursue action against the trustees, your parents. However, the statute of limitations may be a factor after 15 years. And if I'm not looking to sue my family? If I just want the truth acknowledged? The old lawyer smiled slightly. Then I suggest you visit that safety deposit box. Joseph was nothing if not thorough in his planning. Our next stop was Patricia Garza's office across town. Unlike Williams's traditional space, her modern office featured sleek furniture and abstract art. The lawyer herself, a sharp-dressed woman in her 50s, greeted me with a knowing smile. I was beginning to wonder if you'd ever use that key, she said, ushering us into her office. Your grandfather said you might need time, that you were independent to a fault, just like him. You knew him well? I asked, surprised. I handled his personal matters for the last 5 years of his life, matters he preferred to keep separate from his primary attorney. She retrieved a file from her cabinet. Joseph was concerned about Thomas's handling of financial responsibilities. He suspected your father might not honor his wishes regarding your education fund. He was right, Rachel interjected. Patricia nodded sympathetically. Joseph set up contingency plans. The safety deposit box contains documents, but also something else? Evidence he collected regarding your parents' financial decisions. Before we visit the bank, there's something you should know. She slid a document across her desk. It was a bank statement for a trust account in my name, dated 3 months after my grandfather's death. The balance, $120,000. This is the original educational trust, Patricia explained. A month after this statement, the entire amount was withdrawn by your father as trustee. According to banking records, it was transferred to a different account under Vanessa's name. So there's proof, I whispered. Your grandfather anticipated this might happen. That's why he created the secondary trust through me, without your father's knowledge. She handed me another document. This account has been accumulating interest for 15 years. The current balance made my breath catch. $237,165. This is mine? Patricia smiled. Fully vested in your name since your 30th birthday. Joseph's instructions were to reveal it only when you came asking about the past. He said, when she's ready to face the truth, she'll be ready for this gift as well. As we left Patricia's office, Rachel grabbed my arm. Eliza, do you realize what this means? You don't need to confront your parents about the money they took. Your grandfather already replaced it, with interest. This isn't just about the money anymore, I said, clutching the folder of documents Patricia had provided. It's about the lie they've maintained for 15 years. About being told I wasn't worthy of an education while they gave my sister everything. What will you say to them? I looked down at the safety deposit box key in my hand. I'm not sure yet, but first, let's see what else Grandpa Joseph left for me to find. First National Bank of Maple Creek occupied a stately brick building on the corner of Main and Oak, its marble floors and high ceilings unchanged since my childhood. The manager, Mr. Huang, greeted us personally when we mentioned the safety deposit. Box 247 hasn't been accessed in 15 years, he remarked, leading us to a private viewing room. Your grandfather was very particular about its contents. Did he say anything about what's inside? I asked. Mr. Huang shook his head. Only that it contained the truth that would eventually be needed. He was a well-respected customer. Ms. Richardson, we've maintained the box exactly as instructed. He left us alone with the metal container, about the size of a large shoebox. My key slid smoothly into the lock, and the lid opened with a soft click. What's inside? Rachel whispered, peering over my shoulder. The box contained several items. A sealed envelope with my name written in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting, a USB drive, a small leather-bound journal, and a stack of documents secured with a blue ribbon. I think we should start with this, I said, picking up the envelope. Inside was a letter, dated just 2 weeks before my grandfather's death. My dearest Lizzie, if you're reading this, it means you've finally decided to uncover the truth about your educational trust. I always hoped it wouldn't be necessary, that your father would honor my wishes and provide for your education as intended. But if he hasn't, and you've found your way to this box, then my fears were justified. When I created your educational trust, I saw in you a spark, a natural talent for understanding money and its movements. You reminded me of myself at your age. Your sister is bright in her own ways, but you possess something special. Resilience and determination coupled with financial intuition. I spoke to your father many times about treating you and your sister equally, but I sensed his favoritism. Even then, Vanessa was always the fragile one, the special one, while you were expected to make your own way. This unbalanced treatment concerned me deeply. The documents in this box provide evidence of what I suspected might happen. Your father's misappropriation of funds that were legally designated for you. I've included bank statements, recorded conversations on the USB drive, and correspondence that demonstrate my clear intentions regarding your education. More importantly, I've established a secondary trust in your name through Patricia Garza. By the time you receive this, it should have grown considerably. Consider it my apology for not being able to prevent what happened, and a belief in your future. Use this information however you see fit. If you choose to confront your parents, these documents will support your position. If you prefer to move forward. Without reopening old wounds, the secondary trust is yours regardless. No strings attached. I've always been proud of you, Lizzie. Whatever path you've taken to get where you are now, I have no doubt you've traveled it with the same determination and integrity I always saw in you. With love and faith in your judgment, Grandpa Joseph tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. Rachel put her arm around me, giving me a moment to compose myself. He knew, I whispered finally. He tried to protect me even after he was gone. Your grandfather sounds like an amazing man, Rachel said gently. I wiped my eyes and reached for the leather journal. Let's see what else he left. The journal contained detailed observations about family dynamics, starting 5 years before his death. My grandfather had meticulously documented conversations, noting my father's dismissive attitude toward my academic achievements and the disproportionate praise lavished on Vanessa. December 18, 2005. Christmas dinner. Thomas barely acknowledged. Lizzie's academic award in mathematics, yet spent 20 minutes celebrating Vanessa's participation ribbon in the science fair. The contrast in treatment is becoming more pronounced. Lizzie notices. I can see it in her eyes. March 3, 2006. Visited the girls' school today. Lizzie's teachers speak highly of her work ethic and analytical mind. She's maintaining a B+ average while working weekends at the diner. Thomas called this adequate performance. I'm increasingly concerned about his perception of her worth. July 17, 2007. Overheard Thomas discussing college plans with Catherine. They speak of Vanessa attending an expensive private university, with no mention of similar plans for Lizzie despite her being closer to college age. When I inquired, Thomas dismissed the topic, saying, Lizzie isn't college material like Vanessa. I strongly disagree with this assessment. The entries continued, painting a clear picture of the favoritism that had shaped my childhood. In the final pages, my grandfather wrote about consulting with Patricia Garza regarding a secondary trust, his insurance policy for my future. The stack of documents revealed an even more troubling pattern. Bank statements showed my father had begun siphoning small amounts from my educational trust even before the final transfer to Vanessa's account. Emails between my parents discussed strategies for reallocating my college fund months before. They actually took it. Most damning was a letter from my mother to my father, dated just after my grandfather's funeral. Thomas, we need to be careful how we handle this. Joseph was explicit about Lizzie's fund being solely for her education. If we're going to use it for Vanessa instead, we need to do it before Lizzie turns 18. Once she has legal control, we'll lose our opportunity. I suggest we present it as a family decision made for everyone's benefit. Emphasize Vanessa's academic promise versus Lizzie's average performance. Lizzie has always been practical. She'll accept it eventually. We should also consider the smaller trust Joseph set up for Vanessa. Since she won't have access until she's 25, perhaps we should manage those investments more aggressively to maximize returns? Catherine Rachel gasped as she read over my shoulder. They were planning this all along, and they knew about Vanessa's separate trust? They knew everything, I said, a cold clarity washing over me. They deliberately took what was mine, knowing Vanessa already had her own inheritance coming. I inserted the USB drive into my laptop. It contained audio recordings of conversations between my grandfather and my father, discussions where my grandfather explicitly stated his wishes regarding both trusts, and my father acknowledged them. In the final recording, dated just weeks before my grandfather's death, his voice was weaker but resolute. "Thomas, I want to be absolutely clear. The educational trust for Lizzie is hers alone. I've structured it this way because I believe in her potential. Vanessa has her own trust that will mature later. These funds are not interchangeable. Do you understand?" My father's voice replied, "Yes, Dad, I understand. The money will be used as you've directed." I closed the laptop, overwhelmed by the evidence before me. They lied. To me? To Grandpa? Even to Vanessa, probably. They told me I wasn't worth investing in, that Grandpa would have wanted his money to go to the promising grandchild. "What are you going to do?" Rachel asked quietly. I gathered the documents, the letter, and the USB drive, carefully returning the empty box to Mr. Huang. As we walked out of the bank into the bright afternoon sunshine, I checked the time. My parents are expecting us at 4. That gives us 2 hours to organize this evidence and decide exactly how to present it. "You're really going through with the confrontation?" I nodded, a newfound determination strengthening my resolve. For 15 years, I've carried the weight of their judgment, that I wasn't smart enough, driven enough, worthy enough of the education Grandpa wanted for me. I built my career anyway, graduated with honors despite working full-time, paid my own way through it all. Rachel squeezed my hand. "And now they need your help." "Exactly," I said, sliding into the driver's seat of my car. They're about to discover exactly what their not college material daughter has learned about financial accountability. The house I grew up in sat on Willow Lane, a 2-story colonial with white shutters and a wraparound porch. It had once seemed imposing to me, the sight of so many disappointments and comparisons. Now, pulling into the driveway in my Mercedes, a recent splurge after a particularly successful quarter, I saw it differently. A house showing signs of neglect, paint peeling near the gutters, garden beds overgrown. "Ready?" Rachel asked, as I cut the engine. "As I'll ever be," I replied, gathering the folder of evidence we'd organized at a local cafe. My mother opened the door before we reached the porch. Catherine Richardson had aged visibly since I'd last seen her, more gray. In her carefully styled hair, deeper lines around her mouth, she wore what I recognized as her company outfit, pressed slacks and a cashmere sweater that had seen better days. "Elizabeth," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "And Rachel." What a surprise. "Hi, Mrs. Richardson," Rachel replied, with practiced politeness. Eliza mentioned she might need moral support for this conversation, so I tagged along. My mother's smile faltered slightly. "Well, come in. Your father's in the living room. I've made coffee." The house smelled the same, lemon furniture polish and the faint mustiness of old carpet. Family photos lined the hallway, and I noticed a pattern I'd never consciously registered before. Vanessa was centered in every picture, while I stood slightly off to the side, sometimes partially cropped. My father rose from his armchair as we entered the living room. Thomas Richardson had once been an imposing figure in my life, the successful bank manager whose approval I'd never quite secured. Now he seemed smaller, frailer, his confident posture replaced by the slight stoop of a man worried about his future. "Lizzie," he said, using the childhood nickname I'd abandoned years ago. "Thank you for coming." His eyes flicked to Rachel, then to the folder in my hands. "We weren't expecting company." "Rachel's here for support," I said, taking a seat on the sofa. "And I think you'll understand why once we start talking." My mother brought in a tray of coffee and store-bought cookies, an unusual concession, as she'd always prided herself on homemade treats for guests. "Vanessa sends her love," she said, pouring coffee with slightly trembling hands. She wanted to be here, but the children had swimming lessons. I accepted a cup without drinking. "Actually, I'm glad it's just us. What I've discovered concerns the three of us primarily." My father shifted uncomfortably. "If this is about the loan, it's not a loan you're asking for, Dad. It's a bailout. And before I consider it, there's something we need to discuss." I opened the folder and placed my grandfather's letter on the coffee table. "I visited Grandpa Joseph's safety deposit box today." The color drained from my mother's face. "Safety deposit box?" "Box 247 at First National. Grandpa arranged for me to receive the key on my 30th birthday, with instructions to use it when the time was right." I slid the letter toward them. "I think you should read this." My father put on his reading glasses with shaking hands. As they read together, I watched their expressions transform. Shock, then dismay, finally settling into a defensive rigidity I knew all too well. "Your grandfather was confused near the end," my father said, setting the letter down. "He had all sorts of paranoid ideas." "Really? Because his documentation seems remarkably thorough and clear." I placed the journal on the table. "He recorded every conversation, every instance where you dismissed my achievements while elevating Vanessa's." My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "Families make collective decisions based on what's best for everyone. We did what we thought was right at the time." "What was right?" I echoed, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling beneath. "You took $120,000 that was legally mine, money specifically designated for my education, and gave it to Vanessa, who already had her own trust fund coming." "Vanessa showed more academic promise," my father insisted. "She needed the prestigious university experience to launch her career. You were always more practical." "Practical," I repeated. "Is that what you called it when I worked 30-hour weeks while maintaining a B+ average? When I graduated with honors despite having to pay my own way? When I built a successful career despite the obstacles you placed in my path?" "We didn't place obstacles," my mother protested. "We made a family decision about limited resources." I pulled out the bank statements and the damning email my mother had written. "These weren't limited resources. These were separate trusts Grandpa established for each of us. Vanessa had $75,000 coming to her at age 25. But that wasn't enough for you, was it?" They stared at the evidence in silence, my mother's hand moving to cover her mouth. "Did Vanessa know?" I asked. "Did you tell her she was getting both her trust fund and mine?" My father looked away. "Vanessa was young. We explained it as a consolidated family educational fund." "So you lied to her, too." I shook my head. All these years, I believed I wasn't good enough, that Grandpa himself thought I wasn't worth investing in. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" "You seem to have done quite well for yourself despite it," my mother said defensively, gesturing toward my designer watch and tailored suit. "No," Rachel interjected, unable to stay silent any longer. "She did well for herself because of it." "Because you forced her to be self-reliant while giving her sister everything." My father sighed heavily. "What exactly do you want from us, Elizabeth? An apology? We did what we thought was best with the information we had at the time." "The information you had?" I pulled out the final piece of evidence, a printout of the audio transcript where my grandfather explicitly told my father that the trusts were separate and not interchangeable. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You waited until just before I turned 18 when the trust would have legally transferred to my control." My mother's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. "That was 15 years ago. Why bring this up now when we're asking for your help?" "That's exactly why," I said quietly. "You came to me for financial assistance after stealing my educational future. The irony is rather striking, don't you think? My father leaned forward, his banker's pragmatism reasserting itself. Whatever mistakes we may have made in the past, our current situation is real. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. At our age, finding new housing would be extremely difficult. Not to mention humiliating, my mother added. What would people think? What would people think? I repeated softly. That's always been the priority, hasn't it? Appearances. Vanessa's prestigious university, the respectable family home. Never mind that you committed what amounts to trust fraud against your own daughter. I pulled out one final document, the statement for my secondary trust account, showing the current balance of $237,165. Grandpa Joseph created a backup plan for me, a second trust that's been accumulating interest for 15 years. He knew what you might do, and he made sure I would eventually have what he intended for me. My parents stared at the balance in shock. So you see, I continued, I don't actually need your acknowledgement or apology for my own financial security. Grandpa took care of that. What I needed was to understand why my own parents would undermine me so completely and then have the audacity to ask for my help when their poor planning caught up with them. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. The same clock that had counted away the minutes of countless uncomfortable family dinners, award ceremonies where Vanessa's participation ribbons received more celebration than my academic honors, discussions about future plans that never seemed to include my ambitions. My father broke the silence first. We made a mistake, he admitted finally, his voice small. A terrible mistake that hurt you deeply. I won't make excuses for it anymore. My mother said nothing, her eyes fixed on the damning evidence spread across her coffee table. The question now, I said, gathering the documents back into my folder, is what happens next? Elizabeth, my father began, adopting the conciliatory tone he'd used throughout my childhood when trying to manage my expectations. We understand you're upset, but surely we can find a solution that works for everyone. That's exactly what I'm trying to determine, I replied, my voice calm despite the emotions swirling inside me. What would a solution look like to you? He glanced at my mother, who remained stubbornly silent, then back to me. We need approximately $42,000 to clear the mortgage arrears and outstanding property taxes. With your newfound resources, he gestured toward the bank statement I'd shown them. Perhaps you could consider it a loan or an advance on your inheritance. My inheritance, I repeated slowly. The inheritance you've already helped yourself to once before. Rachel shifted beside me, her presence a steady reminder that I wasn't alone in this confrontation. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the backyard where I'd spent countless hours alone with books, while Vanessa's activities always required parental attendance and support. The old oak tree still stood, its branches now stretching, over the neglected garden beds. I'm curious, I said, turning back to face them. Have you asked Vanessa for help? My mother finally spoke. Vanessa is in a difficult position with the divorce. She has the children to consider. And her dermatology practice? The one my college fund helped finance? My father cleared his throat. The practice has struggled recently. Some investment decisions didn't pan out. I see. I returned to my seat, mentally organizing my thoughts. So, let me understand the situation fully. You took my education fund to give Vanessa advantages I was denied. She received a debt-free education, support for her business, and presumably the trust fund Grandpa left her when she turned 25. Yet somehow, despite all these advantages, she's unable to help you now. My mother's lips thinned. Family circumstances change. Vanessa has responsibilities. And I don't? I asked mildly. I have a career I've built from nothing, clients who depend on me, financial obligations of my own, including student loans I'm still paying off because of your decision. We're not asking for charity, my father insisted, just a temporary helping hand. I opened my purse and removed a notebook and pen. Let's be specific then. Exactly how much do you owe? To whom? And what's your plan for staying current after clearing the arrears? My father blinked, clearly surprised by my businesslike approach. Well, the mortgage is $342,000 with Fidelity Bank. We're 3 months behind at $2,000 per month. The property taxes are $8,400, overdue since January. There are also some credit card balances. He trailed off. How much in credit card debt? My mother looked away. Approximately $27,000. Rachel suppressed a gasp beside me. So we're talking about roughly $78,000 total debt, not $42,000. I clarified, making notes. And your monthly income from retirement and Social Security? $4,300, my father admitted. It was sufficient when we didn't have the credit card payments, but the interest has become problematic. I continued writing. And your monthly expenses, excluding debt payments? They exchanged uncomfortable glances. Roughly $3,800, my father said eventually. Utilities, food, medical copays, insurance. So you're operating on a $500 monthly surplus before debt payments, I said, calculating quickly. But the mortgage alone is $2,100, leaving you $1,600 short each month, not counting minimum payments on the credit cards or property taxes. My father nodded miserably. Even if I paid off all your current debts, you'd be underwater again within 6 months, I concluded. This isn't a temporary problem. It's a structural one. Your lifestyle exceeds your income. We've already cut back significantly? My mother protested. We haven't traveled in years. We've reduced entertainment expenses. But you're still living in a house you can't afford, I interrupted gently. The math simply doesn't work. My father leaned forward. We could reverse mortgage the house. If we could just clear the arrears. A reverse mortgage would only be a temporary fix, I pointed out. And given the home's condition, you might not qualify for enough to make a difference. I closed my notebook and looked directly at them. I'm going to make you an offer, but it comes with conditions. My parents straightened, hope flickering in their eyes. I will establish a managed trust with enough funds to clear your current debts, approximately $80,000. However, this trust will be administered by a financial advisor of my choosing, not given directly to you. But, my father began. I held up my hand. I'm not finished. The trust will make direct payments to your creditors to bring accounts current. Then, you will have 2 options. Either sell this house and downsize to something within your budget, with my assistance finding suitable housing, or the trust will make monthly contributions to cover the gap between your income and essential expenses. Provided you adhere to a strict budget I will help create. You want to control our finances? My mother asked, indignant. At our age? I want to ensure that any money I provide actually solves your problems rather than enabling continued financial mismanagement, I corrected. Given our history, surely you can understand my caution. My father nodded slowly. That's fair. More than fair, considering everything. There's one more condition, I added. I want a formal acknowledgement in writing that you misappropriated my educational trust against my grandfather's explicit instructions. Not for legal action. The statute of limitations has likely expired, but for my own closure. My mother stiffened. You want us to sign a confession? I want you to acknowledge the truth, I said firmly. For 15 years I've carried the weight of being deemed unworthy of educational investment. That ends today. A tense silence filled the room. Rachel squeezed my hand in silent support. My father was the first to speak. We can agree to those terms. Catherine? My mother looked away, her pride visibly battling with financial necessity. I suppose we have little choice. You have the same choice I had 15 years ago, I replied evenly. Accept the situation as presented or find another way forward on your own. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. I stood up. I'll have my attorney draft the necessary documents. In the meantime, I'll contact your mortgage company tomorrow to halt any immediate foreclosure proceedings, pending formal arrangement. As Rachel and I prepared to leave, my father hesitated, then asked, "Will you stay for dinner?" We could talk more. I shook my head. Not today. This has been overwhelming enough. I'll return tomorrow with the preliminary paperwork. Outside, the evening air felt cleansing after the emotional intensity of the confrontation. Rachel waited until we were in the car before speaking. That was incredible. You handled them like you were negotiating with any other client. I gripped the steering wheel, suddenly aware of how tightly I'd been controlling my emotions. I had to approach it that way. If I'd let myself feel everything, the hurt, the vindication, the lingering anger, I wouldn't have been able to think clearly. Are you really going to help them after what they did? I started the engine, considering the question. I'm helping them on my terms, not theirs. There's a difference. And the acknowledgement you asked for? That's for me, I said quietly, so I can finally stop wondering if there was something fundamentally lacking in me that made them choose Vanessa. I need them to admit, just once, that it wasn't about my worth as a person. It was about their choices. As we drove away from the house where I'd grown up always feeling second best, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but a reclaiming of power. For the first time in 15 years, I was the one setting the terms, determining what was fair and appropriate. There's one more stop I want to make before we head back to the hotel, I said, turning onto Maple Street. Where are we going? To see Vanessa. It's time my sister and I had a long overdue conversation about our family's financial arrangements. Vanessa's house was exactly what I'd expected. A sprawling Tudor-style home in Oak Ridge Estates, the most exclusive neighborhood in Maple Creek. Perfectly trimmed hedges lined the circular driveway where a BMW SUV sat parked. Are you sure about this? Rachel asked as we pulled up behind the luxury vehicle. You've already had one emotionally draining confrontation today. I need to know if she was complicit, I said, straightening my blazer as we approached the front door. Did she know that her medical school was funded with money that was legally mine? Or was she another pawn in our parents' game? I rang the doorbell, hearing the muffled sound of children's voices inside. Moments later, the door swung open to reveal Vanessa, still model thin at 38, her highlighted hair perfectly styled despite it being early evening. She stared at me in shock. Eliza, what are you doing here? We need to talk, I replied. May we come in? Her eyes darted to Rachel, then back to me. This isn't really a good time. The kids are just about to have dinner and… It's important. Vanessa. About Mom and Dad's financial situation. That got her attention. She hesitated, then stepped aside. Come in. We can talk in my office. The interior of the house was immaculate. Designer furniture, original artwork, a kitchen that belonged in an architectural magazine. 2 children, around 8 and 10, sat at a marble island while a woman in uniform, presumably a nanny, prepared their meal. Vanessa led us to a home office decorated in muted grays and whites, closing the door behind us. So Dad called you too, she said, settling into a leather chair. I told him I couldn't help right now. Yes, he mentioned you were going through a difficult time, I replied, remaining standing. Despite your dermatology practice and what appears to be a very comfortable lifestyle. She frowned. My finances are complex. Brandon's fighting the alimony agreement, and the practice had some setbacks last year. I'm asset-rich but cash-poor at the moment. I see. And did our parents mention why they reached out to me specifically? Vanessa shrugged. You're doing well in New York, finance or consulting or whatever it is. I'm a financial advisor specializing in retirement planning, ironically enough. I studied my sister's face for any sign of discomfort. Vanessa, did you ever wonder how your medical education was funded? She blinked. Mom and Dad covered it. They always planned to support my medical career. With what resources? I pressed. Dad was a bank manager. Mom was a part-time receptionist. How did they afford $300,000 for your education? They saved, she said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. And there was money from Grandpa Joseph. Yes, there was. I pulled out copies of the trust documents. Grandpa Joseph left educational trust for both of us. Mine was $120,000 to be used for my college education. Yours was $75,000 to be released when you turned 25. Vanessa took the papers, her perfectly manicured nails contrasting with the worn edges of the photocopies. I don't understand. What are you saying? I'm saying that 8 months before I would have gained legal control of my trust, our parents transferred the entire amount to fund your medical school instead. She looked up sharply. That's not possible. They told me the money was always intended for whichever of us pursued higher education. Read the documents, Vanessa. Grandpa established separate trusts for each of us. Mine was specifically for my education. As she scanned the papers, her expression shifted from confusion to dawning comprehension. But why would they do that? Because they always favored you, Rachel interjected, unable to remain silent. Surely you noticed. Vanessa shot her an irritated glance. That's ridiculous. Our parents treated us equally. I laughed, unable to help myself. Equally? They came to every one of your dance recitals and science fairs but couldn't make my honor society induction because it conflicted with their schedule. Your activities always received funding while I worked at the diner to buy my own clothes. They displayed your participation ribbons prominently while my academic awards were barely acknowledged. You're exaggerating, Vanessa protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Am I? I pulled out our grandfather's journal and turned to an entry describing a family dinner where my parents had lavished praise on Vanessa while dismissing my achievements. Grandpa Joseph noticed it too. He documented the pattern for years. Vanessa read the entry, her face paling. I never realized. Of course you didn't. You were the golden child. Why would you question the spotlight? I softened my tone, seeing genuine shock in my sister's expression. I don't blame you for their favoritism, Vanessa. But I do need to know if you were aware that your medical school was funded by money that was legally mine. She shook her head vehemently. No. God, no. They told me Grandpa left money for the family's educational needs, and they were investing in my future because I had chosen a medical path. I swear, Eliza, if I had known. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception, but saw only distress and embarrassment. After 15 years of resentment, I found myself believing her. My sister had been privileged, certainly, but perhaps not complicit. So they approached you for financial help, I said, changing direction. And you declined. Vanessa gestured vaguely around her office. It's complicated. Yes, I have all this, but Brandon's contesting everything in the divorce. My practice had staffing issues last year that affected revenue. The kids' private school tuition is astronomical. She paused, suddenly looking vulnerable. I'm barely keeping everything together as it is. The difference is that you're struggling despite all the advantages they gave you, Rachel pointed out. Eliza succeeded despite the obstacles they placed in her way. Vanessa flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? I asked quietly. You received my college fund, a debt-free education, startup capital for your practice, and presumably the $75,000 trust Grandpa left you when you turned 25. Yet here you are, unable to help our parents in their retirement crisis. What did you tell them? Vanessa asked. Are you going to help them? I'm establishing a managed trust to clear their debts, with conditions including a formal acknowledgement of what they did regarding my education fund. You're making them sign a confession? Vanessa looked shocked. I'm requiring accountability, I corrected, something this family has always been short on. She was silent for a moment, absorbing the information. They're lucky you're willing to help at all. It's not luck. It's because despite everything, I don't want to see them homeless. But I won't enable the same financial irresponsibility that led them here. I hesitated, then added, there's something else you should know. Grandpa Joseph created a second trust for me, knowing our parents might divert the first one. It's worth nearly $240,000 now. Vanessa's eyes widened. Seriously? Grandpa did that? He knew our parents better than they realized. I gathered my documents. I didn't come here to make you feel guilty, Vanessa. I came to understand the full picture and to let you know that things are going to change in our family dynamic. What does that mean? It means I'm done being the outsider, the afterthought, the less valued daughter. Moving forward, any family financial discussions will include full transparency about resources and expectations. Vanessa nodded slowly. That seems fair. She hesitated, then added, I'm sorry, Eliza. I didn't know, but maybe I should have questioned things more. It was easier not to. It usually is, I acknowledged, rising to leave. I'm meeting with their mortgage company tomorrow morning, then returning to finalize arrangements with Mom and Dad. Would you be willing to join us? You want me there? She seemed surprised. I think it's important that we present a united front about financial boundaries going forward. They need to understand that their old tactics won't work anymore. For the first time in our adult lives, Vanessa looked at me with something approaching respect. I'll be there. As Rachel and I headed back to the car, she nudged my shoulder. Well, that wasn't what I expected. Me neither, I admitted. I've spent 15 years resenting her, but she was just accepting what our parents offered, like most people would. So what now? Family therapy? I smiled slightly. One step at a time. First, we establish financial boundaries. Then, maybe we can work on the emotional ones. Back at our hotel, I made several phone calls to my attorney in New York, to a financial advisor I trusted in Maple Creek who could administer my parents' trust, and finally to Patricia Garza to update her on recent developments. You're doing the right thing, Patricia assured me. Joseph would be proud of how you're handling this, firm but compassionate. I'm still angry, I admitted. Part of me wanted to walk away and let them face the consequences of their choices. That anger is valid, she replied. But using it constructively to change the future rather than punish the past, that's wisdom your grandfather would recognize. After hanging up, I drafted a formal document outlining the terms of my financial assistance and the acknowledgement I required from my parents. Tomorrow would be challenging, but for the first time in 15 years, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The truth was finally coming to light, and with it, a chance to reshape not just my parents' financial future, but our entire family dynamic. The next morning dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the emotional storm I was about to navigate. I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit, a charcoal pantsuit and ivory blouse that projected both authority and composure. Today wasn't about vengeance or vindication. It was about resolution and moving forward on my terms. My first stop was Fidelity Bank, where I met with the mortgage department manager, a woman named Deborah Saunders who, coincidentally, had been 2 years ahead of me in high school. Eliza Richardson, she greeted me warmly. I heard you were back. In town. Doing well in New York from what I understand. I've been fortunate, I replied, shaking her hand. Though today I'm here about my parents' mortgage situation. Her expression sobered. Yes, I'm familiar with their file. We're scheduled to begin foreclosure proceedings next week if no arrangement is made. I'd like to discuss a potential resolution, I said, sliding a folder across her desk. I've prepared a proposal to bring their account current and ensure ongoing payments. For the next hour, we negotiated terms that would halt the foreclosure while establishing a structured payment plan. By the time I left, I had written confirmation that the bank would accept my intervention and delay any adverse actions for 30 days while we finalized arrangements. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Got the documents from your attorney. Meeting him at hotel lobby in 20. My next stop was my parents' house, where Vanessa's BMW was already parked in the driveway. Taking a deep breath, I gathered my materials and headed inside. The atmosphere in the living room was tense. My parents sat side by side on the sofa, my mother's posture rigid with defensive pride. Vanessa perched uncomfortably on an armchair, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Eliza, my father greeted me, rising halfway before sinking back down. We weren't expecting you until this afternoon. I had business at the bank this morning, I replied, setting my briefcase on the coffee table. Good news. I've secured a 30-day hold on the foreclosure proceedings while we finalize our arrangement. Oh, thank goodness, my mother murmured, her relief momentarily overriding her resentment. My father cleared his throat. Vanessa stopped by to discuss the situation. From Vanessa's uncomfortable expression, I surmised the discussion had been intense. I thought it would be helpful to have her here, I said. This affects our entire family. Rachel arrived minutes later with my attorney, Michael Chen, a sharp young lawyer I'd specifically selected because he hadn't grown up in Maple Creek and wouldn't be swayed by small-town connections or sympathies. Mr. and Mrs. Richardson, he greeted them formally. I'm Michael Chen, representing your daughter Elizabeth in this matter. A lawyer? My mother's voice rose. Is that really necessary for a family discussion? This isn't just a family discussion, I said calmly. It's a formal financial arrangement involving significant assets and legal obligations. Michael is here to ensure everything is properly documented. My father nodded reluctantly. I suppose that's reasonable. What exactly do you propose? Michael opened his briefcase and distributed copies of the documents we'd prepared. Ms. Richardson is offering to establish a managed trust in the amount of $85,000 to address your immediate financial obligations, including mortgage arrears, property taxes, and outstanding consumer debt. My mother began skimming the document, her frown deepening with each page. These conditions are extensive. They're necessary, I countered. The trust will be administered by Carson Financial Services, a respected local firm. They'll make direct payments to your creditors and oversee a monthly budget we'll develop together. You don't trust us to manage our own finances, my father stated flatly. Based on your current situation and past financial decisions, no, I don't, I confirmed without apology. This arrangement protects everyone's interests. You get the financial assistance you need, and I ensure the funds are used appropriately. Vanessa leaned forward. Mom, Dad, I think Eliza's being more than fair. This is a generous offer. Our mother shot her a betrayed look. You're taking her side now? There are no sides, I interjected. There's only a problem that needs solving, and a sustainable solution I'm willing to provide, with conditions. My father flipped to the last page of the document. And this acknowledgement you want us to sign? Michael pulled out a separate document. This is a formal statement acknowledging that in 2008, you redirected funds from Elizabeth's educational trust against the explicit terms of Joseph Richardson's will. It's not legally binding for restitution purposes, but it does establish the historical facts. My mother's face flushed with indignation. This is humiliating. You want us to sign a paper admitting we made a mistake 15 years ago just to hold it over our heads? No, I said quietly. I want you to acknowledge the truth so I can finally move past it. This isn't about humiliation. It's about honesty. Something that's been sorely lacking in our family. I don't see why this is necessary, my mother persisted. We're acknowledging we need help now. Isn't that enough? Vanessa surprised me by speaking up. Mom, I read Grandpa's will and his journals. I saw the trust documents. What you and Dad did was wrong. Eliza deserves this acknowledgement at the very least. My mother turned to her, astonished. You can't possibly understand. I understand perfectly, Vanessa interrupted. You took money that was legally Eliza's and gave it to me instead. You told me it was family money meant for whoever pursued higher education, but that wasn't true. You lied to both of us. The room fell silent. My mother looked to my father for support, but he was staring at the document, shoulders slumped, in resignation. Catherine, he said finally, we did what the papers say we did. We can argue about intentions all day, but those are the facts. And now we're asking for Eliza's help, substantial help. The least we can do is acknowledge the truth. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Whether from genuine remorse or frustration at being cornered, I couldn't tell. You've always been so practical, Thomas. Just sign whatever she wants so we can keep our home. That's not how this works, I said firmly. This acknowledgement isn't a box to check or a hoop to jump through. It needs to be genuine. What do you want from me? My mother demanded. A tearful apology? Self-flagellation? Will that satisfy you? I met her gaze steadily. I want you to understand what you did and the impact it had. I had to work 30-hour weeks while studying full-time. I graduated with $97,000 in student loan debt that I'm still paying off. I missed opportunities, scholarships, internships, because I was too exhausted from working to pursue them. And yet you succeeded anyway, my father observed quietly. Yes, I did. Despite what you did. Not because of it. That's something I need you both to recognize. Vanessa reached over and took my hand. A gesture so unexpected it momentarily threw me off balance. They need to understand, Mom, Dad. For 15 years, I've enjoyed advantages that should have been shared equally between us. I didn't know the truth then, but I do now. And I'm ashamed of how this family treated Eliza. My father picked up a pen from the coffee table. Where do I sign? Thomas, my mother protested. It's time, Catherine, he said wearily. We did what we did. We can't change it, but we can at least be honest about it now. He signed the acknowledgement with a steady hand, then passed it to my mother. She stared at it for what felt like an eternity, her internal struggle visible in the tension around her mouth. I did what I thought was best, she said finally, pen poised above the paper. I always believed Vanessa needed the support more than you did. You were always so capable. That doesn't make it right, I replied softly. Being capable doesn't mean I didn't need or deserve support, too. She signed quickly, as if afraid she might change her mind. As she set down the pen, I felt a weight I'd carried for 15 years begin to lift from my shoulders. Michael collected the signed documents. I'll have these filed and the trust established by tomorrow. Carson Financial will contact you to begin the budgeting process and make arrangements for the first disbursements. As he and Rachel stepped outside to make copies, an awkward silence descended on the room. Years of unspoken resentments, misunderstandings, and pain hung in the air between us. What happens now? My father asked finally. Now, I said. We try to build something new. Not the past relationship where I was always an afterthought, but something based on mutual respect and honesty. Is that even possible? My mother wondered aloud. I looked at Vanessa, who nodded encouragingly, then back to my parents. I don't know, but for the first time in 15 years, we're starting with the truth. That's something. 3 days. After returning to New York, I received a call from Carson Financial Services. The trust had been established, initial payments made to my parents' creditors, and a budget meeting scheduled. Everything was proceeding as planned. I should have felt relieved, but something nagged at me. The conversation with my mother had felt unfinished, her signature on the acknowledgement given grudgingly rather than with genuine understanding. "You look distracted," Mrs. Patel commented as we rode the elevator together that evening. "Did your trip home not go as expected?" "It went exactly as planned," I replied. "Perhaps too perfectly." She smiled knowingly. "Ah, you were prepared for more resistance." My mother signed the acknowledgement, but I don't think she truly accepts responsibility. She's always been skilled at appearing to concede while harboring resentment. "Some people need time to adjust their self-image," Mrs. Patel observed. "It's difficult to admit you've been wrong for so long, especially about how you've treated your child." I nodded, thinking of the rigid pride in my mother's posture as she signed the document. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I didn't have to wait long. The next morning, I received a text from Vanessa. "Mom's on the warpath. Called me at 6 a.m. ranting about blackmail and manipulation. Says she's going to contest the trust arrangement." I called her immediately. "Contested how?" She signed the agreement. "She's claiming duress," Vanessa explained. "Says she only signed because she felt threatened with homelessness. She's contacted another lawyer, Martin Wells." I groaned. Martin Wells was an old family friend and my father's college roommate. Of course she went to him. What about Dad? "He's trying to reason with her, but you know how she gets once she's decided something. This is about more than the acknowledgement, Eliza. I think she's genuinely humiliated that you're now controlling their finances." "I'm not controlling them," I protested. "The trust is structured to help them achieve financial stability." "I know that," Vanessa said patiently. "But Mom sees it as her successful daughter swooping in to fix her failures and dictate how she should live. It's a pride thing." After hanging up, I called Michael Chen to brief him on the situation. He was unconcerned. "The agreement is solid. She can claim duress, but there was no threat or coercion. You offered conditional assistance which they were free to accept or decline." "It's not about the legality," I explained. "It's about finding a workable solution that doesn't turn into a family civil war." That afternoon, I received a formal email from Martin Wells requesting that I reconsider the punitive aspects of my financial arrangement with my parents and threatening potential legal action regarding coerced confessions and elder financial abuse. I forwarded it to Michael with a brief note. "It's escalating. Need to defuse this quickly." His response was immediate. "These claims are baseless, but family court battles can be expensive and emotionally draining regardless of merit. Would you consider mediation?" Mediation felt like surrender, but endless conflict wasn't the outcome I wanted either. I was weighing my options when my phone rang, my father's number. "Dad?" "Eliza." His voice sounded tired. "I want to apologize for your mother's actions. This isn't what I agreed to." "She's making serious accusations," I said. "Elder abuse? Really?" He sighed heavily. "Martin got carried away with the legal language. Your mother is just struggling with the situation." "The situation she created," I pointed out. "Dad, I'm trying to help you both while also addressing a 15-year-old wound. Why can't she understand that?" "Because admitting she made a serious mistake in how she treated you challenges her entire self-perception as a mother," he said, surprising me with his insight. "It's easier to paint you as the villain now than face what she did then." I considered this. "What are you suggesting?" "Come back to Maple Creek. One more conversation, face to face. I'll make sure Martin isn't there to inflame things. Just family." Even Vanessa? Especially Vanessa, he confirmed. Your mother needs to understand this isn't about taking sides. It's about truth and moving forward. I agreed to fly out that weekend, then called Vanessa to brief her. Can you be there Saturday at noon? Absolutely, she promised. I'm not letting you face this alone. That's new, I observed. There was a pause. I know. Better late than never, right? Saturday found me once again approaching my parents' house, this time alone. Rachel had client obligations she couldn't reschedule. The knot in my stomach tightened as I noticed an unfamiliar car in the driveway alongside Vanessa's BMW. My father answered the door, looking apologetic. I tried to keep this small, but your mother insisted on having support. In the living room sat my mother, remarkably composed in a powder blue sweater set, and beside her, to my shock, her sister, my Aunt Diane. I hadn't seen Diane in at least 8 years. She lived in Arizona and rarely visited. Elizabeth, my aunt greeted me coolly. Your mother has been telling me about your conditions. I looked to Vanessa, who rolled her eyes slightly, indicating she'd had no part in this surprise addition. Aunt Diane, I acknowledged. I'm surprised to see you involved in a private family financial matter. When my sister calls me in tears about being forced to sign humiliating documents to avoid homelessness, it becomes my concern, she replied. I turned to my father. You promised this would be just family. Diane is family, my mother interjected before he could respond. And unlike you, she understands that parents make difficult decisions for the greater good of the family unit. Is that what you call what you did? I asked, maintaining my composure despite my rising frustration. A difficult decision for the greater good? Your mother and father invested in the child who showed the most academic promise, Aunt Diane stated as if reciting a prepared speech. That's not favoritism. It's practical resource allocation. Vanessa made a strangled noise. Aunt Diane, with all due respect, you have no idea what you're talking about. I've seen the documents. Mom and Dad took Eliza's legally designated funds and gave them to me against our grandfather's explicit instructions. My mother's face tightened. We've apologized for that. We signed your paper. What more do you want, Elizabeth? I want genuine acknowledgement, not a signature coerced by financial desperation, I replied. And I want a relationship based on truth and respect moving forward. By controlling our finances? My mother challenged. By appointing some stranger to approve our expenses like we're children? I took a deep breath. The trust administrator is there because you've demonstrated poor financial management. That's not punishment. It's protection for everyone involved. It's humiliating, she insisted, after everything we sacrificed for you girls. What exactly did you sacrifice for me, Mom? I interrupted, finally allowing some of my hurt to show. You gave my education fund to Vanessa. You dismissed my achievements. You prioritized her activities, her needs, her future over mine at every turn. That's not true, she protested. It is true, my father said quietly. Catherine, we've always favored Vanessa. Joseph saw it. Elizabeth felt it. I think even Vanessa knew it on some level. My mother turned to him, shocked by this betrayal. Thomas, it's time for honesty, he continued firmly. We did take Elizabeth's fund because we believed Vanessa's medical career was more valuable than Elizabeth's interest in finance. We were wrong. Not just morally wrong in taking what wasn't ours to redirect, but wrong in our judgment of our daughter's potential. The room fell silent. Aunt Diane looked uncomfortably between my parents, clearly not having expected this. Turn in the conversation. My mother's eyes filled with tears. I just wanted what was best for the family. No, I said gently. You wanted what aligned with your vision of the family. You never asked what I wanted or needed. You decided Vanessa was the daughter worth investing in, and I was the practical one who would manage on her own. And you did, she pointed out, a hint of defensiveness returning. Look at you, successful, independent. Maybe we made the right choice after all. Mom, Vanessa exclaimed. Do you hear yourself? Eliza succeeded despite what you did, not because of it. And I'm struggling despite all the advantages I was given. My mother looked at her favorite daughter in betrayal and confusion. What are you saying? I'm saying they were right about Eliza all along, Vanessa replied. She has the financial acumen Grandpa saw in her. She's offering to save your home when I can't help. And instead of being grateful, you're fighting her at every turn. I reached into my bag and pulled out a new document. I've been thinking about this situation since I got Martin's email. I've made some adjustments to the trust agreement. I placed it on the coffee table. The financial support remains the same, but I've removed myself as the trust overseer. Carson Financial will report to both me and Dad jointly, and I've eliminated the budget approval requirement, replacing it with financial counseling sessions that you can attend or not, at your discretion. My father picked up the document, scanning it with surprise. This is much less restrictive. Because this isn't about control, Mom, I said, turning to her. It's about helping you both achieve financial stability while preserving your dignity. That's all I've wanted from the beginning. Aunt Diane, who had been watching this exchange, in silence, finally spoke. Catherine, I think you need to consider what Elizabeth is offering here. It seems like a genuine attempt at resolution. My mother looked from her sister to me, then to my father and Vanessa. Surrounded by family all suggesting the same course, her resistance began to visibly crumble. I don't understand why you would still help us after everything, she said finally. Because despite it all, you're still my parents, I replied simply. And I've learned that holding on to resentment only hurts me in the end. Vanessa reached over and took our mother's hand. Mom, please, let's end this fight and move forward as a family. A real family, where everyone is valued equally. After what seemed like an eternity, my mother nodded slowly. What do I need to sign? 6 months later, I found myself back in Maple Creek for Thanksgiving, the first holiday I'd spent with my family in 3 years. As I pulled into my parents' driveway, I noticed immediate differences. The exterior paint had been refreshed, the garden beds were neatly maintained, and solar panels now lined the south-facing roof. They're taking this budget seriously, Rachel commented from the passenger seat. After much persuasion, she'd agreed to join me for the holiday. The solar panels were Dad's idea, I explained. Carson Financial helped them refinance the mortgage and use some of the equity for home improvements that would reduce long-term expenses. Their electricity bill is already down 40%. Inside, the house felt different too, lighter. Somehow, with updated furniture arranged to maximize the natural light. The formal dining room had been transformed into a bright space, with a large table that could accommodate all of us. Vanessa was already there with her children, helping, in the kitchen while her daughter set the table. The scene of mother and daughter working together struck me as both familiar and strange. This was how normal families operated, something we'd rarely experienced growing up. Eliza! Vanessa greeted me with a hug. And Rachel, I'm so glad. You could make it. My father emerged from his study, looking healthier than I'd seen him in years. Right on time, he said, embracing me warmly. Your mother's just finishing the turkey. To my surprise, my mother's welcome was genuine, if still slightly reserved. Elizabeth, Rachel, happy Thanksgiving. I hope you're hungry. I might have gone overboard with the sides. Dinner was remarkably pleasant. My niece and nephew kept the conversation lively with stories from school, while Vanessa shared updates about her practices improving finances. My father proudly detailed the solar panel installation and other energy-saving measures they'd implemented. Carson says we're on track to be completely current with all obligations by March, he announced. and we've started a small emergency fund for the first time in years." "That's fantastic progress," I said sincerely. "How are the financial counseling sessions going?" My mother surprised me by answering, "They've been educational." Diane didn't believe me when I told her we've started using a budget app at our age. The mention of my aunt made me tense slightly, but my mother waved a dismissive hand. "Don't worry, I told her to mind her own business about our financial arrangements. This is working for us." After dinner, while Vanessa and the kids settled in the living room for a movie, my parents asked to speak with me privately. We retreated to my father's study, where he closed the door carefully behind us. "We have something for you," my mother said, retrieving a large envelope from my father's desk drawer. "It's taken us some time to get this together." I accepted the envelope cautiously. Inside was a formal document titled Educational Restitution Trust Agreement. As I scanned its contents, my breath caught. They had established a trust of $120,000, the exact amount of my original educational fund. "We can't undo the past," my father explained gently, "but we can acknowledge the debt we owe you." "Where did this money come from?" I asked, still processing the gesture. "We've decided to downsize after all," my mother said. "Not because we have to anymore, but because it makes sense at our age. The house is too large for just the two of us, and the market is strong right now." My father nodded. "We found a lovely single-story home in Ridgeview Estates. It's modern, energy efficient, and requires minimal maintenance. The equity from this house will allow us to purchase it outright while setting aside this amount. For you." "This is unnecessary," I protested weakly. "The trust is already handling your finances. I don't need—" "It's not about need," my mother interrupted. "It's about what's right. We took something that was yours, and we're returning it 15 years late with an apology that's equally overdue." She took my hands in hers, a gesture so uncharacteristic it momentarily stunned me. I've had a lot of time to think since our last conversation. The financial counseling has forced me to confront how many of our problems stemmed from poor choices and misplaced priorities. "Including how we treated you," my father added. "We can never give you back those years of struggling through college while working, but we can acknowledge our wrong and try to make amends." I felt tears threatening and blinked them away. I don't know what to say. "You don't need to say anything," my mother replied. "Just know that this isn't about obligation or guilt anymore. It's about recognition of your worth, your success, and our genuine remorse." For the first time in my adult life, I saw my mother without her defensive pride or controlling demeanor. She looked smaller, humbled, but somehow more authentic than I'd ever known her to be. "There's something else," my father said, reaching into his desk again. He pulled out a framed certificate, my college diploma, professionally framed with a small brass plaque at the bottom that read, "With pride and admiration for your determination and achievement." "We should have done this years ago," he said, handing it to me. "Your graduation was every bit as significant as Vanessa's, but we didn't celebrate it properly. This is long overdue." The simple gesture, the recognition I'd sought for so long, affected me more deeply than the financial restitution. I hugged them both, allowing the years of resentment to finally begin dissolving. Later that evening, as Rachel and I prepared to leave, Vanessa pulled me aside. "They told you about the trust?" I nodded. "Did you know?" "I helped them set it up," she admitted. "It was my idea, actually. I've been doing a lot of thinking about equity and fairness these past few months." "That's unexpected," I said honestly. She smiled ruefully. Being the favored child wasn't the blessing I once thought. It created unrealistic expectations I could never quite live up to, and watching you succeed through sheer determination, while I floundered despite all my advantages, it's been humbling. "We both did the best we could with what we were given," I offered. "True, but now we have a chance to rebalance things. I've been talking to my kids about Grandpa Joseph, showing them his journals. I want them to understand the importance of fairness and honesty in families. As we drove back to our hotel, Rachel turned to me. That was not at all what I expected. Me neither, I admitted. I came prepared for lingering tension, not genuine reconciliation. Do you think they've really changed? I considered the question carefully. I think they've started to. Real change takes time, but the acknowledgement feels sincere now in a way it didn't 6 months ago. And the trust fund? Will you accept it? I'm not sure yet, I said honestly. Part of me wants to refuse it on principle, to show that this was never about the money. But rejecting it might undermine their attempt at making amends. Maybe there's a third option, Rachel suggested, something that honors both their desire to make restitution and your journey. Over the following weeks, that idea took shape. By Christmas, I had established the Richardson Educational Opportunity Fund, a scholarship for working students from Maple Creek High School who demonstrated academic potential despite financial challenges. The initial endowment came from my parents' restitution trust, with matching contributions from my own savings and Vanessa's practice. When I presented the scholarship plan to my parents during my Christmas visit, my mother actually cried. Not tears of manipulation or self-pity, but genuine emotion. This is perfect, she said, studying the prospectus, helping students who are in the position you were in. Students like me, I agreed, who need someone to believe in their potential. The first scholarship was awarded the following spring to a promising young woman who worked weekends at the same diner where I had once waited tables. As I watched her accept the award, my grandfather's journal entry came to mind. Lizzie has a spark, a natural talent for understanding money and its movements. He had seen my potential when my parents couldn't. He had tried to protect my future even beyond his death. And now, that legacy would extend to other students who might otherwise be overlooked. Standing beside me at the award ceremony were my parents, Vanessa, and her children. A family transformed by difficult truths, painful acknowledgments, and the gradual work of rebuilding trust. The old pattern of favoritism and dismissal had been replaced by something new, mutual respect and recognition of each person's unique worth. As the ceremony concluded, my mother squeezed my hand. Your grandfather would be proud, she said quietly, not just of what you've achieved, but of how you've chosen to use it. For once, I agreed with her completely. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.